So good evening. Welcome to this CFO Forum on Mergers and Acquisitions, Strategies for Success. On behalf of IIM-A, I'm Mol Sarabhai. I'm a secretary, honorary secretary here. It's a real pleasure to have all of you to explore this very intricate and dynamic world of M&A. We have two distinguished speakers with us. So I would prefer if we can enhance our learning by discussing, and learning what are the leading practices in the industry today for this M&A. We are pleased to have with us Dr. Savan Godiawala. He's a PhD, CA, LLB, ex-Deloitte, angel investor, startup mentor, visiting professor at IIM Ahmedabad and IIT Gandhinagar, and of course, president of the Ahmedabad Management Association. We are also thrilled to have with us Mr. Ameet Desai. He's the founder of Anubhuti Value Trust. He has 36 years of experience in various M&A and valuation exercises. Ameet Bhai has been on board positions in various companies, including Ambuja Cement, Adani Group, Ranbaxy, and Core. Before we begin, please, yeah, let's do this. Sound? Let's give it to you. No formalities. So before we begin, let me give you some little quick scenarios, and that can maybe set it up for the discussions, set it up for the discussions today. I would like to share my own experience where when I started, or now I'm a CEO of a public traded company. I'm a managing director there, but when I started, it was a relatively small company that I inherited, and the company was not doing well. The company had amazing brands. And sir, we had to value these brands and sell them to raise capital. I think Ameet-ji and we were talking about this in the past. At that time, big firms like McKinsey or Deloitte and, things were a bit too expensive. We couldn't, even for the success fee-based model, it was not possible. So at that time is when I'm an engineer, I'm not a CFO or have finance background, but why it's important based on even what our discussion today is. That was for the first time we discussed on how to value things. Valuation is perhaps the most important thing in any M&A activities. And when we looked at it, when you look at the value for a smaller company, what is facing probably all of us today, we rely heavily on our audited financial statements. And we rely heavily on what is the enterprise value, which is a calculation. And we rely heavily on discounted cash flows. But these are discounted cash flows of my distressed company on those brands. But if I'm selling it, the same brands would have a different DCF value for the seller, for the person who's buying these brands. So the question that first I had is how much of that value can be attributed to us, to the person who is selling these brands? So that's one of the questions that I thought was for valuation was very important. Now that I'll run a larger company, on a little bit on a lighter side, every time we have even a slight dip in profits, there are bankers who say our limits might be challenged. There are investors who say, why is there a dip in profit, etc., right? Even if it's a slight dip, company is doing well, it has reserves. But you look at companies in India, take an example of Flipkart. Flipkart has a market valuation of $35 billion. Okay, 35 billion. That's about 50% of India's defense budget. I can't even do the amount of zeros of 35 billion when you convert into rupees. But if you look at their financials, they lose 5,000 crores every year. But still the valuation, so it's all valuation, whether it's a small company, whether it's a large company like Flipkart, valuation plays a key role. And at least for us, we would like to learn from these experts on how do we enhance the value of our companies. So with that, I would give it to Savan Bhai to take the lead, give us some guidance on how to do this better, and we take it from there. Thank you very much.
So thank you, Mol bhai. And certainly valuation is, I have been doing valuation for ages. And doing ages, even today I do not understand how this 35 billion comes for Flipkart. But there are 20 reasons as if I have to, as a valuer, if you come and ask me, or a Flipkart comes and even Walmart comes and asks me, I will give them 20 reasons why this should be 35 and it could be also be 45. You know, end of the day, you're losing $500 million every year. In your books, cash burn, $500 million rupees. So, have dollars. So, say the point is, like a thing like 5G or a 6G also has a valuation impact on Flipkart. Point like the value, the cost of internet bandwidth in India has a, so valuation, certainly we as valuers used to use this word. It's an art and a science, and this was more of a marketing jargon than anything else that we, but answer is yes, it is more about experience, more about reading as many companies, more about comparables. Having said that, dear Ameet bhai, thank you for coming, and we are so happy Ameet bhai is here. When we started this program, certainly applause for Ameet bhai, thanks for him to come. Because we're going to, be getting something from the horse's mouth. And I always tell everybody and my clients also that, I can advise you, so in such detail, but if you ask me to run your business, there's going to be a bigger problem. I won't be able to run. So here is the man who has run the business. Here is the man who has done M&A, signed off on that, agreements. And that's why, Ameet bhai, thanks for coming. My slides, I have some 6 slides in all, 5, 6 slides. If somebody can, there's 6 slides only. I think the time available is 90 minutes or now 85 minutes. I may take 25, 30 minutes. You will take 25, 30 minutes. We open up 25, 30 minutes and we try to do this math. Okay, so I have some 6 slides today, but I will, maybe 1 slide is enough for me to take 90 minutes also out of the 6, because I want to focus on the topic of the day. The topic of the day is strategies for success. And strategies are important. Oh, if you have this, nothing like it. But of course, I'm going to move once in a while only. So strategies for success is important, but I want to give a background. Because this was a class, and I was called here as a faculty, I want to give a background of why merger also. Why thought of a merger? What could be the purpose? What could the value creation of the merger that it could be? So these are the 5 slides. Value creation. So typically, how does this make sense if at all you're thinking about merger? M&A process, I'll give a flavor of that. This M&A is a painful process. It doesn't happen. You thought of, you met somebody in that Italian town, and then you tomorrow take over the company. It doesn't so happen. It's a 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 months process, depending on how complicated the transaction is. If at all, if I am not taken little more time on the first 2 slides, I'll dwell on the 3rd and 4th, diligence and valuation you mentioned. I'll give a flavor of valuation, but then valuation, I'll also try to look at what happens to valuations like Flipkart's, what happens to valuations like liquidation. They're liquidation, which is different. These are going concern valuations. These are startup valuations. And then there are certain futuristic valuations. Then I would put on to the case studies. This is 1 slide. Again, this is only 1 slide. But I will cover several strategies that the companies and the cases would have had, and maybe a slide, if time permitting, I'll go on some M&A dynamics in terms of what the safeguards are required, what could go wrong in a post-merger integration also. So the first slide, value capture. You have to 1 plus 1, if it is going to become 2, doesn't make sense to do any M&As, right? 1 plus 1 has to be much, much more than 2. So that is the point. Now, M&A, as I said, is a painful process, but then it is also an expensive process. You have all the lot of agencies doing helping you if it is a reasonably large. Even if it is small, there's a cost, certainly, which is in terms of money also, time also, resources also. Because you put so many resources for an M&A, and this is not resources at some team, this is a management bandwidth which is used for the M&A. The top management is involved in the M&A, and that's a very expensive thing. And then the McKinseys of the world helping on strategies. Then there's all the Deloittes of the world helping you on the diligence or the valuation. There are bankers coming in. and then several agencies. There would be cross-border, there could be SEBI-related issues, there could be foreign exchange management. So there is a cost. So typically, an M&A in the first of the ladder of this, you will see, there is an acquisition-related cost. So 1 + 1 may end up be, if you are not able to capture the integration values or integration benefits, you're going to be end up at 1 + 1 is equal to maybe 1.5. You may lose money. But then integration strategies, there should be something very clear before you get onto the transaction also. And that strategy is where you will decide that what makes sense and how it makes sense. So many things. What makes sense could be whether I divest, what is the purpose, whether I want market, whether I want technology, whether I want brand, whether I want money. And there could be many more reasons. I want the management bandwidth, that I want that penetration in the particular, I want the distribution. And I'll come to some of the cases where there are varied cases. So that is something that helps create some more value than when 1 + 1 comes into play. There is revenue growth. Revenue comes into play when and then so many reasons. If I'm duplicating the distribution, my revenues, I have penetrated. For example, let me take a case simultaneously when I'm talking. There's a Marico. Marico takes over Beardo. Beardo is a small brand which is having some different product. It makes sense for Marico to just piggyback it to the whole lot of distribution of millions of distributors or retailers that they have reached to. Now Beardo, which is a product which they have taken over, now revenue growth will happen because now the reach is 100,000 times than what Beardo was, the reach was. So that's the strategy where the revenue play comes, and thus it makes sense for Beardo to also say that, yes, I'm here on your plate. That's a different part of the strategy, whether I should just give it up the whole company or I should retain gradually, which also I'll come to. Operating expenses, naturally, wherever there is duplication, you're going to save on that expenses. Now you're going to, there are 2 distributors, same region. Now you say, I did only 1. The whole management bandwidth, huge management bandwidth, that could be duplication. You don't need all of them to duplicate. You would have the systems, the technology, so that is another very important thing. Before you get on a transaction, you will have to try and find out. And then asset efficiency, I'm going to go a little faster on the first 2 slides because I want to dwell more time on the case studies. Assets, how efficient you are using your assets, and naturally the capital. There are several cases. A smaller company, the cost of capital would be higher. A company which is better, more profitable, 2 of them coming together, the cost of capital may also reduce, and that cost makes straight bottom line converts into straight valuations. So this is the typically 1 + 1, and then there is the sellers, if at all there are sellers, also gain because they get a premium over the normal value of their company, and that's the premium that comes. Why Walmart would give a $15 billion? It was when they took it over. Now $35 billion it has gone to invested, huge value also. But that is where the sellers get a premium. Buyer is looking at the future of the business, and thus there is a value for win-win for everybody in the process. Though the company is the same, 2 together, 100 + 200, if that is the sales, it will become 300 only soon after. But then there is upside that they are seeing. Typically a process, and this is a very logical process, but this is the pain that I was talking. A process has so many things to do. We start with the strategy, need and purpose, wherein also we say, do I sell the company? Reason, do I divest? Do I do minority? Do I do majority? Do I do 50-50? Or then what is the purpose? Do I do a subsidiary? Do I hive off one of the products? Or do I hive off or integrate the buyer's one of the product? That's how the structuring keeps happening. So then there's a structure, that's the starting point. Then you plan the deal. That's what what would be the ultimate outcome. Sometimes there's an industrial undertaking that you carve out of your business. Sometimes you say that, okay, we'll put it into a subsidiary, or sometimes you may just merge the whole thing into another. Sometimes it can be just a share transaction. I'm writing the shares to you, and then shares are taken over in terms becoming a subsidiary. And then you get into this valuation at this planning stage is an estimate of valuation. Generally, I or anybody who is a target seller, this applies to both buyer and a seller. A seller will go out on market, less times he will say, I want this money. Most of the times the seller will try to discover the value. And okay, let me go to 10 of them, 2 of them interested, let both of them give me an offer, and then I will figure out where. In the meantime, the seller will also do a math at home that, okay, what could be my estimate, that they may need a professional, and a professional will look into so many such factors that, okay, this should be ideally the range of valuation that you would have. And then you start the process. To start the process, there has to be material to reach out, material to approach, and that material would be a detailed information memorandum, and then you enter into a confidentiality agreement, and then you have a term sheet, terms of reference. That term sheet would be an indicative offer. Generally, this is a non-binding offer. That, okay, I'm giving you this, but now open up your books before I give you a binding offer. Generally, the binding offer comes after the books, but initially, unless I have an understanding, okay, this is the right kind of a company to join, to get along with. They have the right talent, they have the product, they have the market, or what I want, it marries with them, and then they are giving me an offer or the value which makes sense to me. And there could be negotiation at that stage only also, and then comes the diligence process. Now, diligence is an extremely painful process, because the diligence fellows come as if they want to see that what could go wrong in the company. They would like to detect any misdoings, any frauds, or any trends. For example, company is making fabulous, income. 100 rupees of sales, 30 rupees of net profit, and then the diligence fellow will come and say that out of 100 rupees of sales, 70 rupees comes from only one customer and 30 comes for 50 customers. Now they will say this is a red flag. One customer goes away and this company will come down to 30% of business. What will you do? And this is trend analysis. They will do the detailed analysis whether the accounting policies are properly done, and then the results that they will do. Also sustainability of the business. They will look at the business plan and whether there's sustainable profitability, because if I'm coming in and investing in a company, I would want sustainability. I'm not looking at historicals. What it is going to do for tomorrow, day after, day after. So this is a process where there's a team, and then both sides, the support team also will have to be present. Typically 3, 4, 5 weeks that it takes. And then final negotiations. There are going to be sale agreement, share purchase agreement, shareholders agreement. There could be many other agreements depending on the company. Then there would be, if it is a listed company, you would have to have the SEBI filings. SEBI filings would have 14 days cooling period, after which there would be a public or where there's an open offer. And then there could be CPs in the meantime. Then that's conditions to be met. After the definitive agreements and before the closure, that's when the money is exchanged. And then finally, you have a very important role to play, which is PMI, post-merger integration. So many companies at the large level also, they do not realize that how this can go wrong even after everything is done. Strategy, it makes sense. There's all absolutely 1 + 1 becomes kind of 5, 7, 10 if this companies together. But one thing sometimes that the companies go wrong is a cultural aspect. They do not know that that company in the UK and this company in India are not culturally aligned. That guys are going to go home Friday evening 6 o'clock. Here the guys are going to work even on a Saturday in the evening 9 o'clock. Now, this understand, if my expectation is that that fellow in the UK will work on Saturday up to 9, then there's going to be a problem. And this is just one part. There's several parts of the cultural aspect, and this is very important to be considered whenever an M&A. These are the practical aspects of M&A. And then many more things. How do you actually align that cost efficiencies, that management bandwidth, that revenue growth, that distribution duplication, realignment, etc. is the post-merger activity, which has to be a time-bound program. It cannot be a non-time-bound program, and I hope that time-bound program, I also am on a time-bound program. Okay, I have an important slide. Diligence, I have spoken about it. I will just avoid this diligence, and you can ask as many questions, please, but I am more interested in this one slide. So these are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 cases on this. Maybe I will take 8 minutes on 8 cases. I could, of course, take any, Ameet bhai and me, we can speak maybe 3-4 hours on each of them, or on this slide at least. But let us start from the top, business expansion. Tata Chemicals acquired Hind Liver Chemicals. Now, what is the reason? I'm talking now strategy, purely the strategies of doing a merger that these companies got into merger. So Tata Chemicals is a large soda ash company. Then also, this I'm talking about 90s, mid-90s, the transaction that happened. And Hind Liver Chemicals was into fertilizer. So Tata Chemicals saw that this is, as chemical company, that chemical company was fertilizer. There's a diversification happening. Hind Liver Chemical, Hindustan Unilever's subsidiary, was into consumer FMCG. So they thought this is not the core business. They also said that let us divest. And Tata Chemicals became a much larger company as a strategy not to create a fertilizer company, but get a fertilizer company. Also, Hind Liver Chemicals got into new technology, not just fertilizer as a product. So strategy. Competition, Hindustan Unilever is known for acquisitions and acquisitions and acquisitions, right? Again, talking about when Tata happened, then the Hindustan Unilever, at that time Hindustan Lever, they acquired Tomco. Tomca was a Tata oil mill company manufacturing soap. 3 years later, they acquired Lakme because it made sense for their direct portfolio that I rather go and curtail my competition rather than creating a new brand, new product, and then compete with them, make more profit, and then series of them, Brook Bond and Lipton and Quality, and how many acquisitions that Ponds and so many acquisitions that Hindustan Unilever did over a period of time. Recently, Indulekha, Aditya Milk Dairy, Quality Ice Cream, and so many. Kochi Refinery BPCL is a case of a backward integration. There's another strategy. I could have a forward, I can buy my customer over, or I can buy my vendor over. Here, Kochi Refinery is a pure refining company. BPCL is more a retail company, though they have refinery also. A retailer is going and acquiring a refinery to make sure that it has a better supply chain, better supplies in their control. Burroughs Wellcome Glaxo, very interesting case. Globally, Burroughs and Glaxo decided that we will merge. And India, as well as so many countries, they were fighting with they are the cutthroat competitors. They had several litigations against each other, and that pharma companies, you would know it's not new that every company will keep on litigating with everybody for any smallest infringement also. But because the global Burroughs Wellcome and Glaxo, they decided everywhere there's a case of DuPont and Dow also, that they had to, Syngenta also and China Chemist. So many such examples which have integrated because of the global merger everywhere in the world. Now these are entities. India, they are different entity everywhere. So everybody keeps on, there's a huge of merger happening globally for such companies. Tata Finance and Tata, fabulous, very, very interesting case. Tata Finance was almost a bankrupt company, insolvency or verge of, and then the borrowing costs were very high. The Tata Finance was, a case where the Tatas had to fund it, and still it was ailing. And then they found a strategy that Tata Motors need a lot of funding for their vehicles, for their customers. So Tata Motors acquired Tata Finance. Two things happened. One, they got a Tata Motors balance sheet. The cost of funds went down significantly. I become a finance company which makes now competition easy, beat the competition. And Tata Finance gets all the lot of business of Tata Motors, whether they are the heavy duty commercial or they are passenger cars. So win-win. Tata Motors got in-house funding agency, it was within the group, but it was a bailout structure. It was a bailout, otherwise it would have gone into some sick industry. Tax benefits, the sixth one. Godrej, there are many such cases. So this Godrej soap, which was a large company, got merged into Godrej Innovative Chemicals. which was a loss-making company, with a lot of loss in the company, and the profit-making company reverse merged into loss-making company to take the loss advantage, renamed the Godrej into Godrej Soap Limited. So that the loss-making company, they took the advantage of the loss. This is Maneklal Harilal Mills in Ahmedabad. Maneklal Harilal Mills, which was the profit-making company, that time was merged into a loss-making company, and they renamed that loss-making company into Maneklal Harilal Mills. And these are the cases that the benefit. Nirma acquired Core Healthcare. It was a demerger in that case, and they acquired a loss-making unit of Core Health and took advantage of the tax also. Philips, this is a case that Philips, now these are, maybe I remember of several such cases. Philips Medical, Philips Software, Philips Appliances, Philips light bulbs, and so many Philips. They're totally different businesses. They have nothing to do with each other, different management. But one fine morning, that Philips globally, they decided, we don't want to get into so many compliances. Every company has so many compliances to do globally, so many returns to file, so many compliance, and they merged everything into one. Versus, if we take an example, maybe Arvind Mills, Arvind Brands was hived off because they said that makes more sense. It will unlock the value, maybe, happens market, but the purpose is that you do not keep Arvind Brand into a textile, which is a B2B business and B2C business to unlock. So there are strategies where I would do unlocking. My different businesses go different companies. Versus here is a case, the global strategy, reduce compliances and merge everything. L&T Ultratech, again a classic case. L&T owned Ultratech. Ultratech was a cement business of L&T. L&T said, we want to just focus core competence, nothing else. We want to do our engineering. Cement is and chemicals is not my business. And they hived off. Of course, they had a very good planning. They created an employees trust. Employees trust got the shares. Then they sold to Aditya Birla Group. But so that was the strategy, was core competence. I don't want to move out from my core business. So this, and several others, I can remember hundreds of them, but I have done my 7 minutes exactly, 6:56. I may take maybe 1 more minute, 2 more minutes, and then I want to, I want to rather answer as much as possible. But Ahmedabad also, huge. So many, and Ameet bhai will talk about his experience, but Havmor was taken over by a South Korean company, 1,000 crores. $157 million. And the purpose, what was the strategy? India entry. First time a confectionery manufacturer from Korea is coming to India to enter India in an ice cream business. And then they had setting up the factory in Pune and large investment happening. So India entry has also a premium, a seller benefits, because that fellow is not giving just the value. Walmart acquiring Flipkart is India entry, 1. 2, India's potential. 3, the platform that they wanted to use worldwide. So now Flipkart was not just about business. For Walmart was also technology. They created, if they have to replicate, create the technology, they would have spent another billions of dollars for that. And Havmor, Zydus took over Heinz business, Complan, Nysil, all stuff, 5,000 crores. Now that was pure expansion like Hindustan Unilever. Nirma took over Lafarge Holcim, 10,000 crores. It was a 2 million ton per annum. Lafarge was 11 million ton per annum. So 11 million ton per annum, they became always all grant. Then Tata Steel took over Tata Chorus. It was a 53rd, 54th company in the whole world, became 5th largest company in the whole world. It took over a company which was 6 times bigger than Tata Steel. Adani acquiring Ambuja Cement, 50,000 crores investment, effectively valuation much more. Now 50,000 crores, then it was a diversification. They were never into the cement business, but became a giant cement business straight away by acquiring this kind of a Tata Motors acquiring JLR, technology, their flavor, their reputation. They elevated their whole reputation globally. Now Tata Motors, part of the JLR, they know, understand. So the strategies that everything, startup would have a different strategy, and everybody would have minority, majority, etc. So that is it. I think this slide is just If I would have a lot of time, I would have taken it. So extra side, okay. But I think I am more keen to, get the experience of Ameet bhai, and that is why I am also here, not only as faculty, but a participant to hear you also, sir. Yeah, over to you. I'll change it. Thank you. And please ask as many questions as you have. If you can do this.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Mohal bhai. Thank you, Savan bhai. Pleasure to be here. I think if I were to practice many things, M&A is something that I love to practice. Even as a board member for Ambuja, it's fresh out of the oven, as you might have read. There is a southern company that Ambuja just signed a definitive term sheet at 5 p.m. this evening. We concluded the board meeting from 4 to 5, and the board gave a go-ahead. So that becomes an entry strategy for the southern market for Ambuja Cements. Ambuja currently has 5 million tons of capacity in the southern market, and with Penam Cement, it goes to straight 15 million tons. So that's the kind of entry that has given a foothold of about 7.5% market share to Ambuja. At personal level also I have done acquisition. I'm going to talk about it, an ERP company, and what is my experience. I would rather do it as part of question and answer. But the fundamental need in any business to acquire comes from either the organic route is too time consuming. When Gautam bhai bought Holcim's business as Ambuja and ACC, he made a public commitment that they would grow to be the largest cement producer in the country. That was 67 million tons. And he said in 5 years we'll become 140 million tons. This can't be created organically. That means there are acquisitions. That's how Sanghi Cement was acquired. That's how Home Finance's grinding unit was acquired. And now here is the third quarter, and there is a 10 million cement capacity acquisition. So organic route is too time consuming. You got to acquire to grow. Then there are, in pharmaceutical, where my M&A skills have been honed when I worked as global M&A head for Ranbaxy. You have intellectual property portfolios in different countries, and there is no way you can create them because they have been created and they have a finite time life of 15 or 17 years. And unless you go and make that acquisition, you won't be able to get into those markets. So that could be one big reason why people go and acquire. And sometimes you clearly want to overcome the barriers to entry. When I led our acquisition from Ranbaxy in France, we acquired a generic business called RPG from Aventis. And at that time, and I'm talking of 2003, sir, so we paid 66.5 million euros, and that became the largest cross-border pharma transaction for any Indian pharma company. But getting into France was so difficult that it would have taken us 10 years. With this acquisition, we made it in about less than 1.5 years. Alliances people do, but alliances are like marriages. They may not survive. And therefore, M&As are more really chronic solutions for lifelong problems. I'm a practitioner all my life. And therefore, I would like to talk about, when you talk about M&A, process has been very lucidly explained by Savan bhai. Most important thing in M&A, just as in business as in life, is to talk about risks. You can mitigate them by understanding them through due diligence, and I'll come to that. But Morgan Housel, who has been a partner at the Collaborative Fund and writes very good blogs, and I recommend each of us to really read it, he says thus, risk is what you don't see. And we are very good at predicting the future, except for the surprises, which tend to be all that matter. And when you do acquisition, that's what is going to actually unseat you from all the plans that you have made. So when you are working as a professional, I met a gentleman who is going to work for Mohal bhai, and he is going to be the CFO. And if you are going to acquire something, be mindful of the risk. Owners will always take risks. The professionals will have to manage them. And therefore, risk identification and risk mitigation is very, very important. Carl Richard says, risk is what is left over after you think you have thought of everything. Okay? This is not me. This is Carl Richard. Okay? And we must therefore, in life, and certainly in M&A situation, be very, very mindful of identifying risks. Now, then in this book, Morgan Housel talks about risks cannot be predicted because by definition there is something you cannot foresee. And he gives example of the state of California, where the earthquakes are bound to come. So how do you become prepared for the risks? You make the building code which makes buildings able to withstand a certain Richter scale of earthquake. And more importantly, then you invest huge amount of time and money in being prepared for disaster recovery. So when you do M&A, set aside a certain amount of money because for whatever you had thought would be good for that acquisition would certainly fall short. It's like the Indian wedding. You do everything and then you are left with something more to do and the money is needed. So acquisitions are always going to be more expensive than what you think about, and therefore being prepared and investing in preparedness is one thing that we must talk about. I'm not going to read this page and I'm going to let you read this for a minute. If it is not legible, please tell me. I'll read it actually. In gratitude of Field Marshal Potemkin's major role in Russia's conquest of the Crimea, Empress Catherine the Great appointed him governor of that province. When the Empress made her triumphal Crimean tour in 1787, she was strongly impressed by the beauty and prosperity of the villages she passed. Because the Empress thought, what a beautiful region that this gentleman has acquired for me. Legend has it, however, that many of those bustling villages were shams, comprised merely of facades of buildings, which were put up to impress the ruler as she passed and were torn down immediately after the tour was over. These municipalities have come to be known as Potemkin villages. When you do acquisition, you will have Potemkin villages in any transaction that you do. If you think that I am not having any Potemkin villages, that means you have certainly not looked at your due diligence, data room, business intelligence, market intelligence properly. The seller will put up facades. The seller would wrap it up well because seller has to sell. And as they say in the axiom, buyer beware, as a practitioner, I always give this example even in the classroom. You go and buy some vegetable from a vendor and ask him, taza hai, is he ever going to say no? Huh? And here you are dealing with corporate scoundrels. They are never going to say anything that will reduce the value that they have in mind. So be aware of Potemkin villages as you go through an M&A transaction. And that's why by definition, more than 50% of successful M&As result into unsuccessful integration. Because the values of synergies that were estimated are grossly overestimated. The values in cost cutting that was supposed to have been budgeted never gets realized. And the time that someone thought it will take to go to the market gets elongated. So M&As are really, really, really very exciting as you go into them, very difficult as you complete them, and nearly exhausting as you try to integrate them. So that's a practitioner's caution that we must keep in mind. And therefore, to fathom the worth of a business, one has to look beyond the obvious, and that is what would make an acquisition really successful. Now, the challenge in life is acquisition transactions are made very competitive by very nature of them, Even if the seller has one or two buyers, he or she would pretend that there are many and you have limited access to the data room, and by such and such date your binding bids must come through. That is how they operate. And you are unlikely to get all the information that you think you need to make a decision. There's this General Colin Powell who became Secretary of Defense during the Gulf War for US. Some of us are very familiar. And it's a very interesting leadership primer that he has posted on internet many, many years ago. And I have picked up just one slide. I like the whole presentation though, but in interest of time, I just put one slide here. He says, great leaders are almost great simplifiers. And when you have to take a decision, you have to use the formula of P 40 to 70, in which he says the P stands for probability of success, and the numbers indicate how much data you will get to make that decision. And once you think you have gotten 40 to 70% of what you need to take a decision, just jump at it and take a decision. If you wait for 100, you will be much late in your life to take that decision. So when you are in the M&A process, it's extremely competitive. You have to take certain educated guesses and certain educated decisions which may not really turn out to be good. So sometimes you have to go with your gut, and that's what will finally decide whether you are on this side of the 50% or on the other side of the 50%. And that is how, when you complete the transaction, what you begin to think that you are going to get is a value, but you might pay price and not get value. And if you are smart and lucky both, you pay the price, but you actually get disproportionate value in a transaction. I'm at the end of what I wanted to share. This is one of the favorite quotes that I have been carrying since my college days. And when you are doing acquisition, remember you will come across two sets of people. Some willing to work, and the rest would let you work and find out for yourself what's the price or what's the value that you are going to get. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Amit bhai. Kamit bhai, we'll also like to have a flavor of your experience of Ranbaxy a little bit, if at all. Maybe you can cover it maybe in some questions if there are many questions coming up. So would you like to, yes, share the experience, or we want to have, yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
So I think I was very lucky when I worked for Ranbaxy. It was a continuous process. We would get in any 12-month mat, we'll get about 110 to 120 proposals. Okay? We'll throw 60 out of the window in about 48 hours, maximum 72 hours. Too large, too small, not in the geographies or territories that we wanted to do, not in the product areas that we would do, too large a value, or simply not comprehensible. So we'll just throw it away, work on 40, make 15 to 18 non-binding bids every year, any 12-month period. We'll go into data room and make 5 to 7 binding bids based on the due diligence and come out winner with 1 or 2. So I did 6 transactions in 4 years, ranging from Japan, where I acquired a minority stake in a company with an option to go majority. Then we acquired a product portfolio in Germany. Then we acquired a facilities in US, which were very specialized. Then we did this French transaction. Then I did a licensing transaction. And then I also divested the allied business of Ranbaxy. So it's vigorous. You really are on your toes all the time. Since Ranbaxy was the global company and we had defined territories where we would work, I used to be traveling, as I can say, like a mad monkey. I used to do about 350,000 to 400,000 kilometers a year. And most of it, you know, when you are going, that you are either not going to like what you are going to see, and you come back, and only in some cases you will make progress. So disappointment was never the word. Being careful was the word, and that's how you really made it. So that's the practitioner's lesson. It's never easy. It sounds very, very, I would say fashionable, if I may take the liberty of using the word, very sexy, but it is not. It actually makes you lose your sleep because you make mistake, and pharma, you know this better, you have to take care of the patents, you have to take care of the trademarks, you have to take care of the API master files, the product dossiers, and the regulatory approvals.
That's a long time consuming.
Yeah, and I'll just complete this by saying a real experience. When we did this French acquisition, a couple of colleagues of mine, and so we had Thierry Hoffman, who was the country CEO, me, the head of regulatory consulting firm which was helping us. We went to meet the second in command of the regulator in France, like Drug Controller General of India, Deputy Drug Controller General. And I asked that lady that we have nearly 300 dossiers, and we think that you have been approving this annually or biannually for Aventis on an ongoing basis. Can we assume that we will get the same treatment? And she very clearly said, no. We will expect you to refile them by the French standard in next 3 months.
Typical French.
Typical French.
Typical French.
The regulation in France is also very interesting. You need an answer from the trade unions. It could be yes or it could be no, but you need an answer from them. And there is no time limit for the trade union to give you an answer. So you have to really work with them very hard and get an answer from them. Yeah, so that's how interesting they are.
I wanted to ask a question to both of you, and that was regarding the shareholding, both as a buyer and a seller. You go with 50%, you go with a minority stake, or obviously 51% or more. How do you view this decision, both from a buyer side and a seller side? What would be your quick advice for companies, and how to do that?
So, very simple thing if I would say is that if you are looking at capital doesn't matter. Of course, a controlling stake always has a higher value. But if you're looking at, for example, say you have this, counterpart who is investing in you, if you are a seller, say, and if you're a buyer, it applies, you become a buyer, and you're expecting a brand to come, you're expecting their IP to come to you, then he would want to control your company, because I cannot afford to give you a brand keeping a minority stake. And so if you are expecting something more than pure capital, then a buyer would want to control. Typically, there are cases, Mitsui Japan has invested with technology given at with 30% stake also in Indian companies. But typically in 9 or 8 out of 10 companies, they would have at least 51 to keep with them. So if you are opening markets, probably they are making money in that markets also over and above what your supply. You're saying, okay, now I open Japan for you, Europe for you, and then for you, that's a strategic. But if you're bringing in some technology or brand, generally, typically the foreign companies. And 3, and I'll have Ameet bhai's view also, the investors sometimes decide this. I want a consolidation to happen for every investment you make. Now, if investor want a consolidation in the balance sheet to happen, it has to become their subsidiary, and then also they will say, even if it is pure capital, you will need to have a majority stake, 50+1 shares. So that would be typically a decision whether you're a seller or a buyer. If you're a buyer, you will also think that lines only, that how can. 2 is, Ameet bhai mentioned something like that he acquired a company in Japan with the option to increase the stake, right? So that could also be a short gap arrangement, 3 to 5 years, but sooner or later they will come to the majority if there is technology or name kind of involved.
So I think more or less what Savan bhai summarized. The Japanese transaction we did, we took only 10%. Because as I would always like to say in sessions like this, the Japanese are just-in-time managers, and we Indians are just-in-case managers. And we were not sure whether this marriage will really work out. So we took exactly 36 months, 10%, 2 options, 40%, same EBITDA multiple as we had paid today, 41%, 3 times EBITDA multiple. And we ended up buying 41% because they liked us as much. So 10 plus 41 and 51, yeah. Other practical example that I would like to give is if you are a strategic financial investor, like the sheikhs were to the failed Credit Suisse, they always kept their stake below 10%. So they could not be called upon to make the shortfall in the capital. At 10%, it would have been an associate investment for them by the global accounting standards. They could be called upon to meet the capital requirement when the capital adequacy was falling. In case of Credit Suisse, they just washed their hands off.
We can open up any questions, please feel free to ask. Yes, please. You can let us know whom do you want us to answer the question.
By default, you start then.
Good evening, everyone. I am Dr. Manish Agarwal, CEO Jivraj Mehta Hospital. First of all, I would like to thank IIM-A for conducting such an interesting session. And secondly, I would like to appreciate both the speakers. In such a short period of time, you have given crispy presentation. So my question is from both of you, that since I am from healthcare industry, what are the main challenges in mergers and acquisition in healthcare, and how to overcome those challenges? If you could give some insight.
Of course, we are seeing so many healthcare transactions. Shalby would have taken 1, 2, 3, 4, and then constructing one, their joint venture. There's one Asha Parekh Hospital with their O&M. So healthcare industries also evolved significantly, right? Because for them, the centralization of so many, and we can see the big maxes of the world, that they are also continuously shopping for opportunities. So one, they are no different than other industry. Only thing is the typicality is the technology or the quality that they are providing, and reputation. The reputation is important as when a Max Healthcare hospital is going shopping for, the first thing in the due diligence is the technical due diligence and the reputation due diligence. Because they don't want to acquire a company and then rename Max, but the same doctors are there, and then they do not get, they will spoil either the Max name or that. This is what I have been discussing with a couple of the healthcare guys also. Two is their supply chain. Because healthcare, when they have these hospitals across the place, they try to make the biggest advantage out of the cost efficiencies. And the supply, there's a huge supplies that happens in the healthcare industries. And that supply chain also, how it makes sense in the strategically in the location that they are going. Three is the peripheral activities. I have seen the same lot of companies, Apollos, and that how do they have their own diagnostic, or how do they have a tie-up for a diagnostic chain? Because there's again a huge expense on the diagnostic that every patient would have to undergo, and it makes directly a integration forward, backward, however you call it, for healthcare that they are looking at. So these are probably, and then of course now Apollo's kind of gone into pharmacies also. Now pharmacy, they would have investors also. Earlier in India, the multi-brand retail had a problem, and single brand that for FDI was available. So now it is opened up to an extent. So then that would also, you will see over a period of time, foreign pharmacies also coming in and integrating with the healthcare. So healthcare industry, probably I would say, while the process runs like any industry, but the typicalities of healthcare is more from one, reputation, delivery, because the professionals who are performing that healthcare are still going to be more important than that brand name that is there coming up. The patient is still looking, which doctor? Today also we will say, bypass કરવાની છે તો આપણે આ ડોક્ટર પાસે જઈએ. પછી એની ઉપર નથી જોતા કે ઝાયડસમાં છે કે શેલ્બીમાં છે કે સિમ્સમાં છે કે કશે, right? So that is very important in the industry.
So as a practitioner, if I were to evaluate any healthcare company, I think healthcare companies have come of age now. But real estate at one point of time, and healthcare still, I think the biggest concern that investors have is revenue leakages. So if you can display that your revenue leakage is next to zero, then I think you have a good case. Rest of the costs are determined, can be easily tracked through data room. But if there is a bed which is occupied and the invoice is not issued for that, then I think that really flows straight off the PBT. So if you're selling in healthcare, you have to very clearly have an integrity in your system to show that no revenue gets leaked out of my system.
Thank you, Singh. Thank you so much.
Hello. Hello. So I have two questions, really short questions. One is, Savan sir, you mentioned that the cost of capital is inversely proportional to the size of enterprise. So merger does make sense for cost cutting. Now, I want to know your thoughts on this and why is it the case? I don't want to sound socialist, but shouldn't it be the reverse? And second is to Ameet bhai, that it is an extension of the question that sir asked you, that I was reading a biography of Gautam Adani by R.N. Bhaskar. He also said that he wants to acquire, but only 50%. He doesn't want to do 70-30, he doesn't want to do 30-70, because it's his thing that he wants to do 50-50 in case of risk mitigation, and because you know how to run the company well, I bring my business acumen. So he's also emphasizing on 50-50. So these are my two questions and why these are the case.
Maybe I'll answer the first question and then. So, not necessarily. I said that in Tata Motors, Tata Finance case, because Tata Motor was a large company, the cost of capital reduced. And with the reduction of cost of capital, the Tata Finance became viable, and not only viable, it started getting prosperous. This is not necessary. It is the health of the company more than the size of the company. If I am a large company, there is a huge number of companies which are gone into into insolvency, right? So all that companies were paying not only interest, they were rating was down, higher interest, higher penal interest also that they were paying because of the defaults, and then several costs. So it is the health of the company which makes the cost of cost, and so every company is rated, and rating depends based on the rating. It is the interest which is so not, I would not say that it is the size of the company, but naturally the bigger the size, more money available, more avenues of money available. If we take just that example of a Tata Steel acquiring Chorus in 2013 or so, this is 12, 15, how many years? 10, 12 years. They could raise one equity, they could raise the preferential, that they could raise funds in Tata Steel Singapore, they could raise funds in Tata Steel UK, and then they could raise a non-recourse debt. That means that Tata Steel UK's debt which they have raised will not come to even Tata Singapore, which was the subsidiary of Tata Steel India, and which when Tata UK was the subsidiary of Singapore, which acquired Chorus. And if that UK defaults, then it is a non-recourse, it will not come to Tata Steel India, no drain on, it will have to, it can go to Chorus's assets. So the size of the company, this is possible. For a SME, it is not possible that I get into this structure and get a preference share, even equity over there in the outside India, and foreign investor investing in foreign capital. So everything ultimately boils down to the health of the company in terms, and I will say the valuation of the company, that yes, company has this valuation, and thus the investment and the avenues increase. That would also with the size. But in the borrowing will come, the cost of capital would be naturally how your capacity to repay is. And on the, I don't know, 50-50, I didn't understand.
I think
if you understand.
It's publicly known that Gautam Bhai would not settle for anything less than majority. I think Mr. Bhaskar talks in his book about his first joint venture with Wilmar. No, Mundra Port has been, he was 100% owner, and he only did a sub-concession for 2 berths with Dubai Port World, but they didn't have any share in the ownership. So with Wilmar, it was a different strategic decision that they would use Mundra Port, and then they would set up the refinery there. And that's why Gautam Bhai agreed for 50. Otherwise, golden rule there is 51 and nothing less. The only other exception he has made is with Total Gas, where 35, both of them are holding, and rest is with public. But there he was clear that Total is a much larger company, and they would run the company eventually. But To answer, yeah, to answer your question, in all such shareholder agreements, then there are minority protection where you put consensus vote items, that you shall not do this without consensus, you shall not do this without consensus. There are about 11, 12 points that you will incorporate in a shareholder agreement.
The result matters, kind of,
Yeah,
which
result
has to be veto, kind of. And then there is a chairman casting vote also.
Yes.
Good evening, Ameet bhai. Good evening, Savan bhai. I have two questions, two different questions. One, when we look at M&As like Credit Suisse, UBS, or Kochi Refinery, BPCL, the examples that you gave, these are M&As which are mandated by the same owner or sometimes forced down the shareholders by parliament of the country, like in case of Switzerland. Even the UBS shareholders didn't have a vote whether to acquire Credit Suisse or not. So my question is, do you think these are good example to analyze and study when there is hardly any business logic in M&A? That's the one question. Another question is, in many cases, M&A consideration is very important. Consideration is in the form of shares. Consideration is in the form of cash, or sometimes a combination of the two. Swap ratio is decided and so many things. So what does this consideration, the form and the amount, and especially when the shares or cash is there, what does that indicate about the future prospects of success or integration or failure of the M&A?
So when you pay shares as consideration for acquiring business, you pay your company's shares and not pay cash to the company which is selling its assets or business to you. And in listed companies, if both are listed, there isn't much choice. The swap ratio gets determined based on the date that both the boards take a decision, and the prices would determine the swap ratio on that day. The latest example being HDFC Bank and HDFC merger. Nobody could have changed anything because both have been widely held, actively traded scripts, and share swap ratio would get determined based on the share price of the respective entities on that date. When I am trying to buy your business as an example, where you are not listed and I am listed, and I have no other desire but to give my shares to you as for the consideration, then I have to make you believe in the future value of my business. And that's a very hard negotiation. So you can ask for more shares against sale of your business to me. But that is a mere negotiation which also goes on if it were a cash consideration transaction. So nothing changes there. And if both are unlisted or the cash transaction is anyway being done by a listed company, like I just talked about the Pena Cement which we finished this afternoon, it's 10,442 crores of enterprise value. And it would be paid to acquire the complete shares and pay off all the liabilities. So I think each transaction stands on its own foot. Giving answer to UBS and Credit Suisse, my understanding is regulatory pressure was very high, but the UBS management, and there are very good stories that if you go to Financial Times, this was the number 2 guy in JP Morgan who ran this whole transaction. They did take complete confidence of the share owners and the regulators in the other countries, including the US regulators, before they finally signed on the dotted line. And they asked for tons of concessions from the Swiss government for doing that acquisition.
Just adding to that, say international transactions like Facebook acquiring a WhatsApp for a huge amount, 18 billion, which was a cash and a stock deal, right? So there's a partial cash. So this is a negotiated part of it. And the sellers are also looking at selling for cash as well as stock, or stock significantly, when they are also seeing a future. So they will see that their stocks are also going to rise. So that's a pure commercial negotiation. It could be pure cash, it could be pure swap and stock, and it could be a combination of a cash and stock also. Yeah. Any other question? Yes, Bhagwat bhai.
Good evening. You talk about larger company, but what about MSME, which is not listed, and maybe some MSMEs are even not private limited, they are partnership, but having good business and having strategic market availability. So in that case, what is your advice?
So I can actually share with you what I said, my own acquisition experience. As I stepped onto entrepreneurial journey in 2018, I acquired majority stake in Ahmedabad-based ERP product company called SourcePro. Okay? We have a very strong ERP product, but historically the product which we had was not the one which would stand good for us in the next 3 to 5 years. So it is a very small business. How to value it was a question. And it could have been valued with its future potential, but the future potential could only have been realized with a huge influx of future capital. And therefore you finally come to a balance where the existing share owners have to give up the business for what they think is good for them and not commit for any further cash infusion in the business. And that's how we structured it. So whatever their funds were committed to the business were honorably repaid. Then they were given an option to keep the stake, as Savan bhai just now said, stake and cash. And two of them thought of keeping the stake. One of them didn't think it appropriate to keep the stake. And then I took over the majority and took the product forward. Now at the end of 5 years, we have a world-class product after having infused huge sums of capital. And that's a product that now we are proudly marketing. I actually requested my colleague Navya to come here so that she could possibly meet some of you. She deals with partners, etc. Idea is for us is to provide for the Indian manufacturers a product which is actually global standards. And in this room, since we are in the close audience, with full respect for the two other products which we compete with, or three for that matter, SAP has a small enterprise product called SAP B1. Some of you would be familiar with that. Microsoft has another product called Microsoft Navision that they offer to the small and medium manufacturing enterprise, versus New Horizon of SourcePro. And TCS also has one suite of product. I can unabashedly say that our product is superior in many respects. But this journey that I have gone through, I had never foreseen 2 years of COVID to pay all the standing charges, had not understood the challenges of building the product grassroot up in the Angular 7 framework. So the return on capital are still far to come. But whatever valuation I had done at that point of time was fair to the outgoing shareholders. It didn't turn out to be fair to me given the circumstances. I can't really blame them for that. I hope I have answered your question.
On the SMEs, so many transactions are actually happening. And we do not know because they're not reported, then nobody is interested in putting it in that economic times, etc. But I am aware of at least 5, 7, 8 transactions in Ahmedabad where the guys would have come to me for some or the other guidance, advice, I would say. So there's a Vijay Mistry company, which is an infra company, which was acquired by industry. There's a company called Modsonic, they make up non-destructible, it was acquired. These are all 18, 15, 20 crore companies. And they were acquired by other companies also. The only one advice that why SMEs mergers fail, maybe 90 out of 100, is because their books are not diligenceable. The books માં જો એટલે પછી the promoter will કે ના books માં તો 20% છે પણ actually 30% નફો છે મારો. Who is going to believe
This was not the case with SourcePro.
Correct. That is
This
why. So,
was not the case with SourcePro.
so many transactions are
I can
happening.
assure you, the founders and the financial partners, their financial integrity is something that I really respected, and I knew them for a long time before I got in. So the product was falling short of the market requirement. That was our challenge. But what Savan bhai is saying is more often than not true. Sorry, somebody had a question
Sir,
here.
I actually was just wanted to ask the same question.
Yeah, if
Before
it
I
is
ask you the
clean,
question.
then the transactions will happen at every level, kind of. Not that everybody is, the books are not right. Yes, please, Malti Ben. We can hear you.
So actually, sir, my question was that only, that what kind of due diligence actually we should be doing? Because what you were saying is very common in SMEs.
Vendor due diligence. This is my advice to almost everybody. Vendor diligence is when a seller who is inviting an investor, he better not wait for the investor to come and diligence him. Get the diligence done yourself. That is known as VDD, vendor diligence. Rather than an investor coming to you diligence and asking you 200 questions, you get it done yourself. It's an investment. It is never an expense. That 10 lakhs of rupees spent will give you all that 50 things which will break your transaction
So
or
actually-
reduce your value.
Yeah, we are looking to acquire, in backward integration, one farm. So I just wanted to know, sir, what is the SME sector? What is the best way to evaluate a farm? Nobody should be a loser in this case. Valuation. What is the best way of valuation?
See, in any business, the ability of business to generate cash flows in the times to come, and when I say cash flow, net cash flow after meeting with all the expenses, is the only way you can evaluate a business. 90% of the cases. There are remote situations that Mohal Bhai has encountered where there was potential in the brands but cash flow was zero. That's a rare situation and it will require experts because the market potential of each of such brand, understanding of the competitive landscape, understanding of the therapeutic segment will come into play. But if you ask me, 99% of the times, as Savan bhai earlier said, the going concern business can only be evaluated by the business's ability to generate net cash flow. Then if my cost of capital is 18%, I'll discount it at 18, and if his cost of capital is at 12, he'll discount it as 12. You will get a higher valuation from him compared to me. But just adding to this vendor due diligence suggestion that was given, one is keep your books always neat and clean. But if you want to sell, the day you decide to sell, get an external auditor, not your normal auditor, and get what is called vendor due diligence done on your books and keep that report ready. That will really brighten your chances of selling your
Is
business.
it the same when you're not planning to sell but going for an IPO?
In case of IPO, anyway, you require an additional third-party auditor to
Yeah.
come and
Peer review.
give you a peer review and
Peer review.
certification. So the IPO is almost the same, actually far more intense. You are anyway, in a way, selling partial ownership of your business when you do an
It's
IPO.
almost the same thing. Yeah.
So it is divestment.
Thank you.
We can take one more.
Yeah, no, I wanted to, because this was an M&A thing, maybe you can, when you have this thing, so I just also advise, you wrote somewhere that organic growth can only go a certain way. For a lot of companies, you have to acquire to really grow. That's fine. For large companies, that maybe they have people, they have a department, they have, there are so many other smaller companies that perhaps have the aspiration to acquire a company, but don't have the wherewithal, or how do you use your own funds plus debt funds? If you can just address how does that happen, because there are a lot of companies who want to acquire, but they cannot because they are flustered with in terms of the cash flow and the stress. So for this audience also, I think it's a good thing.
I'll be very happy to. See, one of the strongest desires for any businessman is to grow. And the other strongest desire in the entrepreneur is not to divest any of his stakes. This will not work. You have to get financial investors into business if you have the desire to grow. Now, when you get financial investors, you have to also give somebody some comfort that this is how I will run my business. It starts with vendor due diligence, but you also agree on those reserved matters. Supposing I'm inviting you to invest in my company, I have to give you an assurance that I will not restructure the business. I will not write off the Ugranis. I will not give wrong money to the creditors. I will bill each and every invoice and bring it to the books. I'll give you audit rights. I'll give you MIS rights. So the two contrasting desires that each entrepreneur has, that let me keep 100% and yet grow, is directly contradictory to the need to grow disproportionately. Then you follow organic growth. Then that's a clear suggestion. I hope I have answered your question. And if your business is slightly larger, there are seed funds, there are venture funds, there are growth funds which are willing to partner with you, because they actually back the management, your ability to scale up business. We did it for Adani Group when I was the group CFO. We got the largest deal in the power business before even our power plants were implemented by getting 3i, the global private equity firm. We gave them 9% at an equity valuation of 10,000 crores. Gautam Bhai was way ahead of his time. He divested 9% of his company.
Good evening, sir. Myself, Gunjan, borrowed from Gunjan Paints Limited. We are majorly into B2B kind of manufacturing industry, and we are supplying to JSW Paints, Berger Paints, Pidilite Industry, Jotun Paints, etc. So my question is, how do, being a MSME company, we are just a 80 crore company, and we wish to create a value for my company. So how do I, increase the valuation, for my company, sir?
And what is the purpose of increasing the valuation?
Ultimately, this merger and acquisition down the line.
So there is a case here in your industry only. Pidilite acquired Blue Coat. Pidilite is your customer, and the similar Blue Coat was into certain chemicals and then adhesives. So you are into paint adhesives. Blue Coat did a transaction, 80 crore company. You are 80 crore company, 230 crore value. This is public because Pidilite is a public listed company, right? So the clear point, the gentleman who was running Blue Coat was so clear, transparent in his books of accounts that the transaction happened almost without any advisors in the first place. Two is, of course, a very good suggestion at 80 crore. With good set of sticky customers, sticky in terms of I'm sure these companies would be with you for many years, right? 3, 4, 5, 10, maybe more years. So that also gives a reputation. A SME IPO is a very good idea. Mm-hmm. Now, when it comes to valuation, the diligence, if that finds some 7 things, this data was not available, this information was lacking, this analysis could not be completed, that defeats the IPO in that, even valuation in an IPO, because that fellow will write as a risk factor, a merchant banker. So, ideally, the books, get the diligence done, and then the valuation, naturally, you are a B2B, you are not a Flipkart that future nobody knows, it will be 100 times or 10 times or they will go down also. But in your case, it is the industries which is known, your industry is valued. Of course, Pidilites of the world are valued 50, 60 times their net profit. But you are being a B2B, their brand. Correct. It would still be, according to me, 15, 20 times or more. So that is how it will happen. But the sustainability of the profit to the reliability of the profit. This profit will sustain and grow, growth rate, very important for valuation, and reliability, yes, what you are showing is the profit.
Yeah. By God's grace, what we have shown on the balance sheet till date is correct.
This is general discussion, of course. So
either go and sell yourself to Pidilite or any of your
we
customers.
We are supplying to Pidilite, sir.
So you can sell it to them, they might be very happy to buy you out. Or do an SME IPO, valuation gets established, 3 years hence, sell it to them.
Okay, thanks.
Absolutely. Valuation is always in your mind, then you use ratios to justify them.
Ratios
These financial experts, they have found ways to address a psychological requirement called valuation, which resides in owners' minds. Since owners need that, that's how the financial professionals come into play. बाकी हमारा कोई काम नहीं है.
Yes, over to you, Mehul bhai. Yeah, maybe last question.
Yeah, take the last.
I could share a quick insight, not a question. because we are on the small enterprises acquisitions topic. So I'm into the fraud investigation space. We recently had a case in Bangalore where a small startup was acquired by one of the biggest venture capitalists of the whole world. Like it would be probably one of the top 3 venture capitalists in the world. And they had called us, the venture capitalists had called us for an investigation into the books post their acquisition, about 2 years after their acquisition, and they were confused that nothing is as per the books. And what has happened, they were absolutely, they were bonkers of what is happening in this company. So we investigated and we found out that the company had actually planned a very strategic cleaning of the books for about 1 year or so. They had hired consultants to do that.
When I said it's in your mind and you have to find a formula, I said without tinkering with the books.
Over a period
Your
of 1 year,
integrity, if you compromise with your integrity, then valuation is not a limit.
exactly, that is the second
But
side.
that's
the
not what
dark
I am
side of
ever
the-
going to advocate.
100%.
That's not I'm ever going to advocate. Okay?
Exactly.
If I were to share with you that when Mundra Port, as it was called, when we did the IPO, I don't think anybody in this room would believe that we sold it at 100 times the trailing PAT. 175 crores profit, 18,000 crores pre-money valuation. And look, still after that, people have made multifold money. So you can't get away with valuation by just painting a picture.
It is going to be discovered sooner or
Ultimately,
later.
in this case, the promoters will pay because the shareholders' agreement are watertight. That if there is some fraud detected later, that they will only end of that.
Exactly.
Generation of Renbexy after all of us left.
Right.
Yes.
What they did,
Correct.
and they are languishing. So it's not a good example.
500 million, I think, that fee. FDA.
Question.
Yeah.
Quick
500
question.
million, yeah.
Okay, so I had a quick question that was related to due diligence. Since we were talking about it, there are a lot of type of due diligence. It's like there's an entire list now. ESG due diligence has also come up. Everything is industry specific and depends on the type of acquisition. But what is that core type of due diligence which is non-negotiable, or those type of due diligences which are overlooked and because of which most M&As fail?
So P40 to 70. Always remember that, right? You want to definitely see last 3 years financial statements. You definitely want to do secretarial audit. You definitely want to see patents and trademarks if that is important to running the cash flows of the business. You definitely want to meet the key employees if they are running the business. You definitely want to see criminal cases pending or civil cases pending if you are dealing with a certain type of business. If I start drawing a list of due diligence questionnaire, nothing will ever be complete. But these are some 6, 7, 8 non-negotiable items. But if you are buying a pharma business, you have to have an IP due diligence. You must have product dossiers due diligence. So life is never going to be easy, as Savan bhai said. When you are into M&A, it's a tough deal. Don't restrict yourself. Ask for the most, get whatever, and then use P40/70.
Thank you.
So this P40/70, we are almost reaching 100% of our time, though, although we can go on and on. The next of this forum is July 11th. So please, all of you, please join that CFO for the Merger and Acquisition Finance Forum. There's a feedback form that I hope everybody has received, and you can see there's a QR code there that one can do. I want to thank Savan bhai and Ameet bhai. Great, valuable insights. I have learned so much. I'm sure the audience has learned so much more. Thank you all for participating and coming to AMA. Thank you very much.